We took 5 of this year's best performance cars on a North Wales road trip to find out which one is best.
We've all got our own view on what makes a perfect performance car. Flat 6 or V8, turboed or NA, manual or paddle shift. Even with the impending ban on ICE vehicles, the combinations are still endless. And while the perfect recipe probably can't exist, that doesn't stop us making another pilgrimage to North Wales to figure out which of 2022's crop of performance cars is our favourite. For this year's test, we're celebrating 2 momentous occasions. One is the weather in Wales actually being decent, and the other is the 60th anniversary of Car Magazine. To our brilliant readers and viewers, thanks for the last 6 decades, and here's to plenty more. Chris, over to you.
We'll start with the Italians, or more specifically, the Ferrari 296 GTB. It's arguably the most important car to come out of Maranello for at least a decade, and it's probably the one that stands out most among this year's contenders, not least because of that paint job. We've been waiting decades for Maranello to build another small V6 sports car, back to basics, almost affordable successor to the original Dino, but that's definitely not what the 296 GTB is. Yes, it does have a V6, but it's more expensive and more powerful than the old V8 powered F8 Tributo, and it's also a plug-in hybrid. Does that PHEV hardware add to the driving experience, or just overcomplicate it?
This 296 is a little bit more special than most though. It's got the Assetto Fiorano package. It's an optional sort of driver-focused kit. Makes it a little bit more fun on track, a little bit more hardcore, kind of a stepping stone to something like a Speciale version that we'll get further down the road. Costs just under £30,000, brings multimatic dampers, a 15 kilogram weight saving, a little bit more in the way of aero devices, more carbon goodies, and a Le Mans inspired livery that you can't get with the standard car.
Hardcore tifosi will know that this car's red and blue colour scheme tips a hat to old Ferrari racing car liveries, but I'm pretty sure most people driving past presume we spilled a cup of coffee on our keyboard while we were on the online configurator.
And to be honest, it's equally busy inside here. Okay, so there's no central touchscreen. This must be one of the few cars on sale this side of a Dacia Sandero that doesn't have a big central touchscreen in the dash, so it looks fairly simple in that regard, but there's plenty of technology going on. You've got a big configurable digital instrument pack ahead of you, you've got another display over there, and you've got a steering wheel. It's got more buttons than a Hobbycraft warehouse, and they're touch sensitive buttons as well, or the idea being that, you know, they're actually blanked out when you don't need them to make it simpler, but I'm not sure. All of it takes a bit of time to get your head round. Fortunately, the driving experience is way more intuitive. This is a car that you can feel comfortable going naughtily fast in straight away. But before you do start getting silly, you need to sort the powertrain mode out. There's 2 Manetinos now, one for the powertrain and one for the chassis settings. The powertrain one, well, it starts in hybrid mode, which effectively means it starts as an EV, and the engine will come in later when it's needed. You can even lock it out altogether and just drive this as an EV. Well, briefly anyway. It's got a 15-mile electric range, which is not amazing, but you know, it's enough for pootling around town in. And as in the SF90, the hybrid mode is actually really impressive. The way the 2 powertrains, the electric engine and the combustion engine, sort of interplay is really good. You're always aware of the transition when the engine drops in and out because you can hear it, of course, but it's very cleverly managed. And I can imagine if you were driving this car all the time, you'd use the hybrid mode a lot, actually. It's really good. But it doesn't quite deliver that traditional Ferrari driving experience that we expect. It just seems a little bit strange, the engine coming in and out when you want to drive fast, when you want a bit more control, when you want a bit more performance. For that, you need to just toggle up the Manettino, and that keeps the little V6 in play. I say little V6, but there's nothing small about its power outputs. We're talking about over 650 horsepower, nearly 550 pound-foot of torque. Now those numbers make it more powerful, more grunty than the Maserati MC20's V6, and we haven't even got to the electric bit yet. Throw the volts into the mix, and that power output jumps to 819 horsepower. And it feels it. Okay, that's not quite as much poke as the bigger SF90 delivers. That has 986 horsepower, 1,000 metric horsepower. But of course that divided it up between four wheels. This is rear wheel drive alone. And if that sounds like a recipe for a massive accident, well, it probably will be for some people. For us, I think it makes this a better car than the SF90 for a few reasons. One is that this car, I think, sounds better than the SF90. Now, not quite sure I'd buy Ferrari's Mini V12 line. Anyone who's driven a naturally aspirated V12 from Ferrari recently know that this kind of slightly muted turbo engine isn't anywhere near as exciting to listen to, but it is sweeter, it is a nice noise, it does make a sweeter sound than the V8s, which are always slightly harsh. You know, exciting, but definitely a little bit harsh. This is a bit more soulful. It's twin turbocharged, there's a little bit of lag still. The electric motor, as well as sort of boosting the top end power output, it also adds some torque fill lower down the rev range. It's kind of like a warm-up act. When the turbos are backstage still tuning their guitars, the electric engine's out there trying to keep the crowd happy. It doesn't completely eliminate the turbo lag. Very good. I'd say not quite as good as a naturally aspirated car as the Cayman GT4 RS we've got here today. It's like a naturally aspirated car with a slightly soggy throttle response. But it's a really good little engine. It likes to rev out. It's got plenty of character. And plenty of performance. It's seriously quick. Not quite as quick as an SF90 maybe, but more than fast enough. Particularly since only the rear wheels are doing the pushing.
And if you want to drive fast, even on a bone-dry day like today, you have to get comfortable with having the second handling Manettino driving mode selector switched to its more sporty settings. Otherwise, the traction control light will be strobing away like you're at a 90s warehouse party, and the power will be cut to what feels like about half of its true output.
Having said that, it never feels like it's anything less than stable. What it does feel is really playful. And that's another reason why I think this car is probably better than the SF90. With that car, the all-wheel drive system gave it a bit of stability, but the sensation of the torque going through the front wheels, I don't know, it just felt a little bit sort of unnatural for a Ferrari. It just didn't feel familiar. This car feels more like those old Ferraris that we used to love, the 458, 488, F8 Tributo. But on top of that, you've got the hybrid kick from the SF90. It feels like the best of both worlds.
Sorry, I didn't understand.
Yeah, we have a feeling some classic Ferrari mechanics might get a similar sensation if they ever get the chance to lift the bonnet of this hybrid.
It really feels like it wants to turn, this car. It's got a shorter wheelbase apparently even than the old F8 Tributo, and it gives it this immediate sense of wanting to change direction, just absolutely fly into an apex. And of course you've got the really quick steering rack. Electric steering now. I don't think Ferrari's steering's ever been like reference quality, so I don't think the switch to electric is anything to worry about. Medium speeds, low speeds, there isn't really much feel. It's a bit disappointing, but actually start to work this car a little bit more, a little bit harder, and there is enough feel there to tell you what's going on. It feels actually quite nice, quite communicative. It even rides pretty well, and that's saying something because this is on the Seto Fiorano suspension pack, which is a little bit stiffer and doesn't have adaptive dampers. Ferrari says that's worth 1.5 seconds round its Fiorano test track. But I don't know, I have a feeling that I'd probably be just as happy with the standard car on the stock tyres and the slightly more versatile adaptive dampers. I bet it probably doesn't give away much in terms of outright ability to go fast and just adds a bit of bandwidth.
And that's the thing about the 296 GTB, it does have tons of bandwidth. It's got the plug-in hybrid hardware that makes it city friendly, it's got a decent boot, and it's also really exciting to drive on roads like these. Is it too fast? Quite possibly, but the more immediate question is whether it's actually more satisfying than something simpler, purer and closer in concept to the kind of sports cars Ferrari's left behind. Is the 296 actually better to drive than something like the Maserati MC20?
Well, I should imagine that Ferrari are feeling pretty confident. Maserati has, after all, been operating in the shadow of the prancing horse for years, but no longer. From previous experience behind the wheel, we know that the Maserati MC20 might just be one of the most well-rounded and usable supercars on sale today. But how does that translate to a car magazine sports car giant test? Well, to find out, we needed to take an unexpected trip away from North Wales and head somewhere a little bit different.
Okay, so a couple of things we've got to tell you about before I go into more detail on the MC20. And, well, you probably noticed that I'm not in North Wales and I'm not on the right side of the car. This is a different MC20 and I'm currently on a circuit in Italy. And that's because the MC20 that we had on the sports car giant test, well, they had a small problem. And it was a small problem, but it meant that because we were in the middle of nowhere in North Wales, we couldn't get it fixed. And that meant there was no pista cameras or dynamic driving on the MC20. And that was a big shame because the car, the press car, had done so many thousand miles. It had been abused by various different publications and it had been flawless. I'd driven it myself over 1,000 miles and it was great. But unfortunately, these things happen. So what we thought we'd do is film the car here in Italy so you've still got something to look at and to listen to. The impressions won't be from driving on track because of course we drove the other cars on road, but hopefully you'll get the idea. I'll start with the development of this car because when I was reading the press pack all those months ago when I first drove the car back in January, one of the things that really impressed me was that 97% of this car's development was done digitally and also the process was done in less than 2 years. I mean, that's extraordinary. And it tells you just how different this is going to be from any Maserati that's come before it. This isn't just a marketing exercise to say, we've started again. This is a proper step change for Maserati. There's nothing like this that has ever come before it. For example, it's got a brand new carbon tub, like you see on a McLaren. It's been developed by Dallara, who racing fans will know plenty about. It's got double wishbone suspension all round, adaptive dampers that are adjustable using the drive mode selector down here. And actually that carbon tub has been adapted so that it can take the all-electric model of this car, which is coming, and also the open-top model. And we know from driving McLarens that when you've got an open-top car with a carbon tub, the difference between the hard top and the soft top, barely anything. So that should be incredible. Now, I've already said that when you have it in GT mode, it's really easy to drive and very comfortable, but as soon as you take it into sport or Corsa and those dampers get firmed up, there's a big difference. There's still a little bit of body roll that you can detect in some of the faster corners especially. But what I really like about this car is the way that it feels so lithe and agile heading into a corner. I mean, here we are, third, second. You can feel how taut it is, but also how much it's on your side. This is a mid-engined Italian supercar. It should be intimidating. And yeah, maybe it is when you really, really push on. But on the road, it feels like a sports car. It feels like a supercar, sports car hybrid. And honestly, that's one of the biggest compliments that I reckon you can pay a car that is aimed at entertaining you, because you get the fun, but you don't feel terrified, so you feel like you can push it and start to exploit it. And when you do that, it rewards you so handsomely. The front end has just enough weight over it so it bites into a corner, yet on the mid phase and the exit phase of the corner, it still feels light and agile. You've got to be a little bit patient when you put the power down, because the rear squats. It just goes a little bit light at the front, but once you get that rotation and the angle out, it's really rewarding. And actually on the road, it reminds me a little bit of an Alpine A110 in the way that it handles a corner, especially one with bumps in it. The damping's really nicely judged. And although this car weighs 1,500 kilograms, which isn't featherweight, but it's not super heavy either, it carries that weight just so well.
There really is a sports car feel to the MC20, yet the engine still delivers proper supercar performance. A 3-litre twin-turbo V6, it's been made exclusively by Maserati after 20 years of shipping them in from Ferrari. It delivers 621 brake horsepower and 538 pounds-foot of torque, and features a patented twin combustion system designed to improve efficiency and specific power output.
Well, whatever Maserati's done with the power unit, it's worked. Wow. 0 to 62 miles an hour in 2.9 seconds, 0 to 120 miles an hour in less than 9. Top speed is 202 miles an hour. All of it sent to the rear wheels via an 8-speed Tremec transmission. And it is breathtakingly quick. My only reservation is it a Maserati engine?
I say that because it's very clear that this car is a fresh start for a brand that probably needed it after years of not hitting its potential. However, I do think that they may have taken that a bit far with the engines. The turbos take centre stage in the delivery, while the wastegate-led sound is worlds away from the spine-tingling melodies of bygone Maseratis.
Of course, it's never going to sound or respond like a naturally aspirated unit, but all I'd say is that with all the history and the heritage of Maserati, surely, even with a brand new engine like this, you should be able to hear it come screaming past on the straight and go, yeah, that's a Maserati. With this, although it has character, this engine, I'm not sure that it's a Maserati character. Maybe that'll change in the next few years, who knows?
However, this doesn't change the fact that the MC20 is very promising for Maserati. It's wiped the slate clean, yet delivered a car that feels polished, not least due to its staggering ability as an all-rounder.
Speed, looks, handling, the MC20's put on a brilliant show for itself. But more than that, I'm just happy to see a Maserati back on a sports car giant test. It's been way too long for this fabulous old Italian brand. So welcome back.
So despite the best efforts of a dodgy coolant hose, we managed to give the Maserati a fighting chance, even if it was in a different country, and a few weeks later. Now though, it's time to head back to North Wales and get behind the wheel of something smaller and lighter, but oh, so much louder.
What you just heard is the bone-shaking sound of a 4-litre naturally aspirated flat-six 911 GT3 engine that's been manhandled into the middle of a Porsche Cayman. It makes 493 brake horsepower at 8,400 RPM. But if you want to go higher, it'll go all the way to 9,000. Now you might have noticed that it's a little bit less power than the 911 GT3, and that's because the exhausts have a longer way to go. But actually, seriously, who cares? It's only a handful of horsepower less, and it doesn't feel any slower. The noise that this car makes is actually different from the 911 GT3. And what's really clever is that, from the outside at least, it doesn't sound that much louder than a regular Cayman GT4, but on the inside, because you've got these intakes here right by your ear, you get that induction noise that is so loud, and it's just fed straight into your ear hole, which makes it one of the loudest cars from the inside that I have ever reviewed. You know, on engine sound alone, I could probably stop this test here and declare the Cayman the winner. But I won't, because the more I get to tell you about it, the more I get to drive it.
Porsche admits that the Cayman GT4 RS doesn't quite have the same aerodynamic abilities of the 911 GT3, yet it still marks a big step forward over its GT4 sibling. NACA air intakes on the bonnet provide brake cooling without disrupting drag, while a four-way adjustable front diffuser and slatted wheel arches ramp up front and rear downforce levels. And of course, who can miss that swan neck rear spoiler nicked from the 911 GT3? With 3 different stages, it delivers an extra 25% of downforce and looks like something that's been taken straight from the grid of the Le Mans 24 Hour.
And to be honest, if you rocked up at the famous circuit and bolted a set of Michelin slicks on, you'd likely be competitive straight out of the box. This car does 0 to 62 miles an hour in 3.4 seconds, and on the Nürburgring, it's 23 seconds quicker than the regular Cayman GT4, and that car is no slouch. It really isn't, but this, this makes it feel it. But you know what? Enough of the numbers, because this car is all about how it makes you feel. And the first thing to say is that it doesn't feel like a smaller 911 GT3. It's got a different personality to it. The GT3 relies on the monster traction from those big wide hips and big tyres. This feels like it's been shrink wrapped, so that when you go into a corner with that mid-engine layout and that extra tweak of rear camber on the rear axle over the regular Cayman GT4, it wants to rotate in and out of the corner. It just feels like it pivots around the axis. Absolutely is a racing car that's been put into road spec, and sometimes, yes, it can be a little bit too much, a bit too firm perhaps, but when you get onto a smooth piece of road, wow, this is going to take some beating. Honestly, the thrill you get, the juxtaposition from this super lithe, agile handling and this vicious, loud, Mad Max style engine. Ooh. Yes.
A quick look at the technical sheet shows the GT4 RS is carrying the same super firm spring and damper rates as the 991 911 GT2 RS, and yet find a vaguely smooth piece of road, and there's no doubting the breathtaking quality of the suspension and how it carries the car in a manner that simply defies logic.
I don't think the steering is quite as blessed with feel as you might imagine it would be, but it makes up for that through the feel, through the seat, through the floor, the sound, the feeling of the car being small on the road. You can really attack the corners. All I'll say is it would have been nice to have an option for a manual gearbox. I know there's a few diehards that will really, really want that. I don't think it's essential, but it would have been nice. Although, on the other side of that, this 7-speed PDK, it's like it's been taken straight out of a racing car, because the way it changes down, I mean, listen to this, 5th gear now, 4th, 3rd, 2nd. And you can do double blips as well, so once again, 4th gear, double blip to 2nd. It's good. Even if you are manual gearbox diehard, you have to admit, this is good. I would love to drive this car all day, but a few things. One, I'm getting a splitting headache, as you can imagine. Two, running out of fuel. That happens when the car is this good to drive. And three, I think Mr. Chilton has got a new Lotus that he wants to tell you about. So, yeah, I'll let him take over for a bit.
Talk about tough gigs. We've got some big hitters in this test. Ferrari, Porsche GT4 RS. It's a big ask, isn't it, for a Lotus to be able to take on those and win. It's massively outranked in power and performance, but we know that power and performance isn't the be-all and end-all of Lotus. They're quite often not the fastest cars in the group, but they are often the most fun. So is this Lotus the most fun of the cars here? That's what we're going to find out.
Before we get to exactly how this car feels on these roads, let's take a minute to look at some of the improvements Lotus has made that haven't necessarily got anything to do with ride and handling, but do make this car far more desirable than the Evora it replaces. I think we can all probably agree it looks better, it now has much more of a supercar vibe going on, and the interior has also taken a giant leap forward. There's a large tablet touchscreen, a digital instrument cluster, and the overall look and feel of the cabin is definitely better.
I still don't think that it's up there with Porsche Cayman in terms of fit and finish. I think once you start delving a little bit deeper, you'll find that it comes up short, but it's certainly made an improvement. Also not as good as the Cayman is the driving position. It feels more upright, more saloon-like. These seats look really supportive, but there's something a little bit strange about them. They just don't seem to have as much lateral support, and they're not quite as comfortable as they look like they should be. The clutch pedal as well is just a sort of spongy and heavy feel about it. The brakes also surprisingly long travel and a little bit soft. Not exactly off to a great start then, is it? What about the engines? Well, in 2023 there will be two available. That's when a Mercedes AMG 2-litre joins the lineup, but for now it's a fairly simple range with just one engine, which is this V6 supercharged Toyota motor carried over from the old Evora. It makes 400 horsepower and it's connected to a 6-speed manual box or a 6-speed auto. 6-speed auto? What year is this? 2003? Makes a decent noise. Got a bit of V6 snarl, bit of supercharger whine. Not that exotic, but it's okay. And you've got 400 horsepower to play with. It doesn't always feel that rapid though, and I don't just mean in the context of the 700 and 800 horsepower cars it's up against today. It's just got a quite leisurely power delivery. I suppose it's the nature of the supercharged engine. It's not savage, it's more refined, just more leisurely in its delivery. It gives it a sort of effortless GT feel, but it's maybe not quite as exciting as some people are hoping for. Now you could say the same for the chassis. It rides really well. Of course, Lotuses always ride brilliantly, don't they? It's very supple. Maybe a little bit too supple for some people's taste.
certainly if you're planning on spending any significant amount of time on the track, you'll probably want a little bit more body control and a bit more bite at the front end than this car delivers.
But then this car is on a fairly soft setup. It's the touring suspension, which is the softer of the two passive damper options, and it's on a less sporty tyre. But I think maybe the 2023 car, the AMG engine version with the optional sport suspension, I think that might be more fun. I think be with a better chance of winning this test. This one's just got a little bit more push at the front end, a little bit more body movement. I still like it. There's definitely been some dissenting voices in this group who've not been so keen. I think this is actually still plenty of fun, but it certainly does move around a little bit more than the other cars we've got here. I think this would be nice to live with, but in terms of just pure excitement, sports car excitement, that's what this is about, this test. I'm not sure this car's got what it takes. But which car has? We've driven them all now. Time to make a decision. Oh, hang on a second. What's that McLaren doing over there? What's this then?
Is it an Artura?
I don't think it's the Artura because I can't see any flames, but it's 765 LT. Spider.
I haven't driven one of these yet.
What's this?
Lovely day.
Attention, car magazine. Key.
We should.
I think we should.
Okay, me first then. So Chris, not an Artura, but what a day to have a convertible.
Yeah, it's nearly as hot as being on fire in an Artura, isn't it? Without the flames.
Yeah, sorry McLaren. But yeah, this is the 765 LT, so it's basically a long tail version of the 720S, which we know is already a brilliant supercar. And this should in theory be even better. It's got 754 brake horsepower, 4 litre, twin turbocharged V8, 0 to 62, 2.8 seconds. I mean, as supercars go, it should tick every box.
Compared to the coupe, the Spider version of the 765 LT gets a raft of changes that help modify the personality and add a sense of humour. The dampers are softer all around, the active rear wing has been tweaked, there's a slower steering ratio, and a new titanium exhaust that's 40% lighter than the steel system. But equally important though is the fact that in just 11 seconds you can drop the carbon roof and get an even greater sense of the hysterical turn of speed.
First time you put your foot down.
Oh, I'm such a good passenger.
It's...
Yeah.
I mean, you could yeah.
That is great because the McLaren's engines, they're not the most musical engines. They generate a fair bit of noise, but I think it's great being able to just hear a little bit more of what's going on. Yeah. There's a lot to be said for that. Are you a convertible person? Normally?
There's a time and a place for it, I think. And with a supercar, it's got to have a sense of humour. There's got to be a sense of fun about it. And with the hardtop version of this, is it as much of a sense of fun? Because or is it just a serious track weapon? As soon as you take the roof off, it ceases to be like a proper track weapon. You're not going to enter a race into it. So yeah, I think with a supercar, absolutely.
What mode are you in there then?
So I've got it, obviously it's an active, so you can change the modes around. And it's for the filming sequences, we've got it in sport mode on both, so it's not too raucous. You can use track mode on the road, it is usable, but to be honest with you, you can have it in any mode and it's thrilling, but I reckon sport on both is where it's at. But if you do put it in track for the engine, you get the dash rotating round, which is really good fun. I like that. It's a really nice touch, and it adds a sense of ceremony. But I tell you what, the engine with the exhaust and the titanium exhaust and it popping away and it crackling away, it adds something which I've not really felt or heard in a McLaren before. But for me, it's still the supporting act to what is one of the greatest chassis, I mean, I'm going to say ever, because this carbon tub has changed the game, and this is pretty much the pinnacle of that at the moment. The way it goes through corners, the feel you get through the steering in a car with this much power, it's honestly sensational.
For me, McLaren leads the pack in steering. I think they're probably the last sort of, volume, small volume admittedly, but volume car maker to make really, really great steering.
Yeah. And that's the thing with supercars, is you think because it's a supercar, you get the best of everything, but actually, they are often heavier, and because they've got so much power, some of that feel can be lost. But the steering wheel in this is absolutely gorgeous. It's so nicely trimmed, fits around your hands. You've got the one-piece carbon paddles, and the view out, again, absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
So it means that you can feel so much more of what's going on, and that goes to the pedals as well. I mean, the brake pedal, it's the best brake pedal I think I felt in a car. It's so firm, and it doesn't travel that much, which is what you want, and you can just meter in by individual percentiles how much you want to brake into a corner.
In fact, I enjoyed the McLaren so much that it totally escaped my mind that Chris might want to have a go in what, for me, is the finest McLaren supercar since the company's relaunch. So, we stopped at the next lay-by and swapped places, with the idea being that Chris would play devil's advocate. Or maybe not.
That steering, my God. Why? Why does the Ferrari not steer like this? The whole theatre of the car, the doors.
Yeah.
Okay, we're here to talk about what's more fun on a road like this, but I think
The theatre is fun.
It's important, isn't it? It really matters. It feels more special, this car, even before you've started it up.
So what?
Oh, that sounds like a massive stone cracking off the
It
windscreen.
really does, yeah.
This is one of my favourite supercar series, the 720, 765 series. But I know they're all related. It's great to see how McLaren has evolved, not just those cars, but all of its cars. When you think back to the 12C and the little kind of the niggles, it didn't look that great. The brake feel was pretty poor. You can't level these same criticisms, new generation of cars. There's a kind of rawness to this car. I mean, specifically the drivetrain, the sound, but everything is just a little bit edgy, a little bit scary in that old school supercar way.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's really, really appealing. So is this more exciting than the Ferrari? That's the question. I'd say it is.
On a mad dash down a road like this, if you didn't have to worry about your license or even your life, and at the end of it, that was it, you didn't get to drive anything else, this is more exciting. It just gets the hairs on the back of your neck standing up.
I admit, a little bit disappointed not to have the Artura there, because of course it's a fairly close match to the Ferrari in lots of ways, the 296 GTB, and also because it's the latest and greatest supposedly from McLaren. We want to find out. We already know they can do these kind of cars. We want to find out, can they step up to the next level? But any disappointment out the window or out the roof. So who'd have thought it?
Who would have thought?
Dark horse. It's coming in the last minute, and it's got to be in with a shout, hasn't it?
It's absolutely in with a shout.
And so, as the third day of our Welsh adventure drew to a close, it was time to make our decision. For myself, Chris, and the car road test team that joined us on the test, the Cayman GT4 RS was a clear contender. From the screaming engine to the incredible chassis, it's a fantasy list of ingredients destined to go down as one of Porsche's all-time greats. And then there's the Ferrari. Even by its own formidable standards, the 296 GTB has a sensational spread of abilities and sets the tone for a hybrid era that will bring the curtain down on supercars as we know them. With this in mind then, it's not hard to see the irony in the fact that the actual winner of the 2022 Car Magazine Sports Car Giant Test is the McLaren 765 LT Spider. It's not the newest or the most high-tech or the most high-profile of the cars here, but put simply, it gave us the biggest smile, the most satisfaction, and it's the one that almost all of us would take given the choice. Objectively, it may not be perfect, yet its ability to set your senses alight, to up your heart rate to 100 and drop kick your stomach to the moon and back is, in this company, unrivaled. And that is why it's our winner. Thanks for watching.